woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by sterile white walls and the steady beeping of machines keeping rhythm with my breath. Tubes were connected to both arms, and a dull ache pulsed through my chest. The last thing I remembered was pulling my truck off the highway near Omaha, clutching at a pain I had mistaken for just another bout of stress. It wasn't. It was a heart attack, the kind that makes you see your life in snapshots. The nurse told me I had flatlined twice. She smiled and called me lucky. I didn't feel lucky. Not when I reached for my phone and saw the only message waiting for me was from my wife, Dana. We had been married for 15 years. There were no kids, just the two of us in a quiet home in Sioux Falls. I expected a message filled with concern, maybe a question asking how I was doing. But what I saw instead was a screenshot of our joint bank account, and below it, a message that cut deeper than any chest pain could. I deserve this after everything I'd done for you, it said. The balance shown was zero. Every cent I had saved was gone. Over $61,000, money meant for emergencies, for my retirement, for truck repairs, just vanished. It was the kind of moment that's supposed to trigger outrage or despair, but all I felt was empty, hollow in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. I didn't reply with words, just a thumbs up emoji. That was all she got. The next morning, the doctor came in with discharge papers and instructions that read like a warning label. No driving for 6 weeks, no stress, rest as much as possible. He asked if someone was picking me up. I lied and said yes. I didn't tell him I wasn't going home. Instead, I called the one person I hadn't spoken to in months, my older brother, Jeff. We weren't estranged, just different people living different lives. He answered on the first ring. Need a favor, I said. Name it, he replied without hesitation. I need a place to crash for a few days, and I need you not to tell Dana. There was a pause. She doesn't know you're alive. Oh, she knows, I said. She just doesn't know I'm not coming back. I met Dana at a gas station just outside Cheyenne, Wyoming. It was a breezy spring afternoon, and I was on my way to deliver a shipment when I noticed her struggling with a flat tire on the side of the road. She looked frustrated, phone in hand, but reception out there was patchy at best. I pulled over instinctively, offering a hand like it was second nature. Back then, she looked at me with something close to admiration, like I was a knight in grease-stained jeans simply because I knew how to use a jack. That moment, simple as it was, became the starting line of our story. 6 months later, we were married. It was quick by most standards, but neither of us was a naive teenager. I was 30, she was 27, old enough to know what love looked like, but maybe not old enough to recognize all its warnings. I was already living life on the road, a long-haul trucker, putting in 3 weeks of driving for every week back home. Dana said she understood. She even claimed to admire the grit it took to stay behind the wheel for hours on end. And for a while, I believed her. In the early years, we made it work. I'd call every night from motel rooms across the country. Ohio, Nevada, Kansas, didn't matter where I was. I always made time to check in. We'd talk about everything, the places I'd passed through, the new recipes she was trying, the little mundane things that couples share to stay close even when they're far apart. But over time, things began to change. The phone calls got shorter, from an hour of chatting to 10 minutes of small talk, then 5, then sometimes just a text. Made it to Phoenix, all good here. Her responses dwindled too. Okay, or drive safe, were often the extent of our communication. And yet, I didn't question it. That's the thing about routine. It numbs you. You don't notice the small shifts until they become impossible to ignore. Looking back now, the signs were all there. She stopped asking when I'd be home. She started going on weekend trips with friends I'd never met. When I asked about them, she waved it off, just coworkers, nothing exciting. Her phone was always face down on the table. She'd take calls in another room. Passwords changed without warning. Once she said she was transferring money to a higher interest account, and I nodded. Trust, after all, is the backbone of marriage. But trust doesn't protect you from betrayal. It just makes the fall harder when the truth hits. I spent too long thinking we were just growing apart because of the distance. I never imagined she might have been drifting toward someone else or something worse. Jeff picked me up from the hospital in his old pickup truck. He didn't ask many questions, just helped me into the passenger seat and drove in silence. We'd never been especially close. not because of any falling out. Life just took us in different directions. He stayed local, working construction jobs, raising a daughter. I hit the highways, building my life behind the wheel. But family is family, and when I needed him, he didn't hesitate. His house was a modest two-bedroom place on the west side of Sioux Falls, cluttered with tools and half-finished renovation projects. He had converted one room into a guest room years ago, and now it became my temporary shelter. He handed me a sandwich, but I could barely taste it. Everything felt numb. My body was still recovering, but it was my mind that was most exhausted from betrayal, from confusion, from the growing storm of decisions I knew I had to make. "Does Dana know you're here?" Jeff asked. I shook my head. "No, and I'd like to keep it that way, at least for now." "You really took everything." I nodded. "Every last cent, our emergency savings, truck maintenance fund, even my retirement buffer." Jeff leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow whistle. "What are you going to do?" I didn't have a clear answer then. "Rest," I said, "doctor's orders." But the truth was I had already started thinking several moves ahead. That first night at Jeff's, I didn't sleep. My body was weak, but my mind wouldn't shut off. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, replaying years of small overlooked moments. Dana checking her phone at dinner, brushing off questions about bank transfers, getting oddly defensive when I asked about credit card charges. There was one particular memory I kept circling back to. Just a few months ago, when I'd refinanced our mortgage to lock in a better rate. Dana claimed she was too busy to come to the signing, so I did it myself, and on a whim, I listed the house solely under my name. My credit was stronger anyway. She never even asked to see the paperwork. Back then, it felt like a minor convenience. Now it felt like my only leverage. And then there was the medical power of attorney I'd updated last year after a close friend had a stroke. That moment had scared me into action. I gave the legal authority to make decisions for me, not to Dana, but to someone I trusted. My niece, Megan, Jeff's daughter. She was in law school and sharp as a tack. She had helped draft the documents and ensured every detail was solid. At the time, Dana hadn't cared, or maybe she hadn't noticed, but that small decision now turned out to be a turning point. I sat at the edge of the guest bed, turning my phone over in my hands, rereading Dana's one and only message. The gall it took to steal everything, then claim it was deserved. But she wasn't just cruel, she was careless. She thought I'd be too broken, too dependent to fight back. She had no idea I wasn't coming home. 3 days into my stay at Jeff's house, I received a message from Harold, our neighbor. It was short, just a casual check-in. "Haven't seen you around. Everything okay? Dana's got some guy over. Thought you should know." I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the weight of those words sink in. It wasn't that I didn't already suspect something. I had, but seeing it confirmed, reading it from someone who had no reason to lie, hit differently. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, Jeff and I drove downtown to the main branch of our bank, not the one Dana and I normally used where the tellers knew our faces and names. I asked to speak with someone in the fraud department. The woman who greeted us looked to be in her 40s, professional and composed. I explained my situation in detail, that I had been hospitalized and unconscious, and that during that time my wife had withdrawn over $61,000, 0 cents, from our joint account without my knowledge or consent. I showed her the text message Dana had sent, along with the screenshot she included as proof of the account being drained. The woman maintained a neutral expression, but I could see something shift in her eyes. A mix of concern, perhaps even indignation. "Mr. Doyle," she said, "we can initiate a fraud investigation, but given that it's a joint account and your wife had equal access to it, we'll need to establish that these actions occurred while you were incapacitated." "I can get medical records from the hospital," I said, "proof of the dates, when I was under sedation, when I was declared conscious." "Good," she replied. "And I have to inform you, if this turns into a criminal matter, it may involve law enforcement." I nodded. "I'm aware. I'm not trying to get revenge. I'm trying to get justice." On the way back to Jeff's, we stopped for gas. I stayed in the car while Jeff went inside to pay. Through the windshield, I watched a father and his 2 kids come out of the convenience store with ice cream cones, laughter spilling into the air. For a moment, I felt like I was observing a world I used to belong to, a life that now felt far away. Back at Jeff's house, I made 3 important phone calls. First, I called my dispatcher at the trucking company and formally requested extended medical leave. My doctor's orders gave me 6 weeks, but I knew it might be longer. The second call was to my credit union, the one where I kept a small business account for occasional independent jobs. That account was in my name only, and more importantly, Dana didn't know it existed. The third call was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Blake, an old friend of Jeff's, a guy who had helped him through 2 messy divorces. Blake was seasoned, strategic, and not easily rattled. I need to know where I stand, I told him. The house, the finances, everything. He agreed to meet the next day. That night, I pulled out my laptop for the first time since the hospital and began logging into accounts Dana had never bothered to ask about. Over the years, I'd opened a few modest investment portfolios, nothing huge, but solid enough. She never paid them much attention, probably because they weren't flashy or immediate. While I checked balances, an unexpected text lit up my phone. This time, it was from Dana. "Where are you? Your truck's not at the depot. Did they tell you I came by?" I didn't reply. Minutes later, another message arrived. "Cameron, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. We need to talk about this." I set the phone down and closed my laptop. Jeff looked over from the kitchen. "She reaching out?" Nodded. "Yeah. You gonna respond?" Yeah. That night, I walked around Jeff's neighborhood beneath a sky scattered with stars. For the first time since my heart failed, my chest didn't ache. Not physically. Instead, I felt a strange calm. Not anger, not even sadness. Just a quiet certainty that I wasn't going to let her win. She thought she had taken everything from me. What she didn't realize was that I was just getting started. So the morning after Dana reached out, I was still silent. I had no intention of speaking with her directly. Whatever she wanted to say could wait, or better yet, be filtered through a lawyer. I wasn't ready for her explanations, and honestly, I didn't think they mattered anymore. Then, around noon, I received another message, this time from my neighbor Harold. He had always been polite, the kind of man who waved when he saw you across the yard. His message started casually, asking if everything was all right, since he hadn't seen me around, but it quickly took a sharper turn. He said, "Dana had someone else over at the house, a man he didn't recognize, staying there often." I stared at the screen, the realization creeping in like cold air through a cracked window. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the cold goodbye she sent while I was in a hospital bed. There was someone else. I didn't respond to Harold. Instead, I sat in silence for a long while, my mind assembling the puzzle pieces. All those unexplained weekend trips, her disinterest in our calls, the way she'd guarded her phone like it held government secrets. I should have seen it sooner. I had wanted to believe in the version of Dana I fell in love with, but that version was gone, if she ever really existed. That afternoon, I drove downtown again with Jeff. This time our destination was Blake's office. His space was small but clean, shelves lined with books, legal pads stacked neatly on a desk that had seen plenty of battles. He greeted us with a firm handshake and no small talk, just business. So we sat down and went through the details. I laid everything out, from the hospital stay, the account being drained, Dana's messages, and now the possibility of infidelity. Blake was meticulous. He wrote notes, highlighted areas on my bank statements, and cross-referenced dates of withdrawals with my hospital records. When I mentioned that I had refinanced the house in only my name, his eyebrows rose. "It'd be more valuable than you realize," he said, flipping through the paperwork I'd brought. The house was technically considered marital property, but the refinancing shifted some of the legal footing, and since I had done it while Dana chose not to participate, that might work in our favor. When we finished going over the documents, he paused and looked me in the eye. "You're in a stronger position than you think," he told me, "but this is going to get uglier before it gets better." Before leaving, I checked my phone again. Dana had sent another message earlier in the day. She wanted to know where I was, commented on how my truck wasn't at the depot anymore, and asked if anyone had informed me she had come by looking for me. Later, another message arrived. She said my behavior was ridiculous, that I couldn't just disappear without talking to her. She insisted we needed to speak and resolve things. I didn't reply. I wasn't playing her game. That evening, as I sat with Jeff on his porch, the sky began to turn that deep blue of early nightfall. I thought about the life I'd built with Dana, the years of effort, the sacrifices I'd made, the miles I'd driven to keep a roof over our heads and money in our accounts, and now all of it was unraveling. But strangely, I didn't feel panic. I felt clarity. She wasn't just careless, she was arrogant. She assumed I would crumble, that I wouldn't know how to fight back, but I had something she didn't: time, help, and motivation. She thought I'd be broken by the betrayal. What she didn't count on was how much strength there is in a man who has nothing left to lose. The following week passed in a haze of phone calls, paperwork, and long moments of quiet planning. Blake had given me a list: documents to retrieve, dates to verify, account histories to print out. I wasn't just recovering from heart surgery anymore. I was preparing for war. The first major step came when I returned to the house. I knew Dana wouldn't be home during the day. She worked regular office hours. So I timed my visit for late morning, taking Jeff along for backup. My key still worked. The house felt colder than I remembered, and not because of the weather. It smelled different, too. Cologne that wasn't mine lingered in the hallway. In the kitchen, I noticed 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher and several empty bottles in the recycling bin. I didn't dwell on the emotions. I moved with purpose. I gathered the essentials: some clothes, my passport, a lockbox with personal documents, and any financial records Dana had left carelessly stacked on the desk in our small home office. Before leaving, I walked past the hallway table and noticed something odd. The framed wedding photo that used to sit there was missing. Not moved. Gone. That absence said more than any text message she could have sent. Back at Jeff's, I met with Blake again. We spread out the materials across the kitchen table, a map of years of shared life now reduced to statements, receipts, and screenshots. Blake zeroed in on the refinancing documents first. Because I had signed them alone, and because of a clause referencing my medical condition, something I had added after my friend's stroke, Blake believed we had solid ground to claim the house as mine, not ours. He also reviewed the bank statements. The withdrawals were fast and deliberate, he observed. She didn't drain the account slowly. She emptied everything within 48 hours. That kind of speed wasn't impulsive, it was planned. Blake explained that while joint accounts typically grant both parties full access, the context changed everything. The fact that Dana took the funds while I was medically incapacitated, unconscious, and unable to consent opened the door for a case of financial exploitation. To strengthen our argument, Blake advised we gather more evidence: precise hospital documentation, testimony from the nurses or attending physician, and any digital footprints from Dana, emails, texts, or online account logins made during my hospital stay. I called Megan, my niece, that evening. Her internship at the credit union downtown had given her not just experience, but also tools. I didn't ask her to do anything illegal, just to help me connect the dots that might otherwise be missed. 2 days later, Megan called with something big. She had discovered a bank account I'd never heard of. It was opened under Dana's name alone, but what stood out was the pattern of deposits. Consistent, strategic amounts, just under the federal reporting threshold. And they weren't from her payroll. The deposits aligned suspiciously well with my travel schedule, made while I was hundreds of miles away, often in another state. It was clear Dana had been stashing away money in secret for over a year and a half, but Megan wasn't done. There's an authorized user on that account, she told me. Not a co-owner? No, she clarified. Just someone who can access it. View, deposit, withdraw. I didn't have to ask. It's Harold, isn't it? There was a pause. Then she answered, yes. I sat back, stunned not by the fact itself, but by the level of deception. Dana and Harold weren't just involved emotionally. They were coordinating financially, building a safety net, a secret life, using my trust and my earnings. She's been preparing, I muttered. Planning for what? just in case I ever left. Lake disagreed when I told him no. He said she wasn't preparing for you to leave. She was making sure she'd be okay if she decided to leave you first. The next morning, I drove by Harold's house. I didn't stop, just circled the block once, noting a few changes, new landscaping, a shed that hadn't been there last year. I took photos, documenting it all. Those upgrades likely weren't cheap, and they probably weren't paid for with Harold's salary alone. Later that evening, Blake received a call from Dana's lawyer. They were suddenly interested in talking settlement. Dana was offering to return half the funds she took in exchange for half the equity in the house. Blake saw through it immediately. They're testing us, he said, trying to see how desperate you are. They want you to settle fast before we uncover more. What did we say? I asked. Nothing yet, he replied. Let them sweat. 2 weeks after Blake filed the initial motion regarding the misappropriated funds, we had our first day in court. It wasn't the full divorce trial yet, just an emergency hearing to address the money Dana had withdrawn while I was in the hospital. But this hearing was crucial. It would set the tone for everything that followed. I wore the only tie I owned, a dark blue one that had mostly seen funerals. Jeff loaned me a jacket that was a little too big in the shoulders. I didn't care about the fit. I cared about making a statement that I was standing up for myself. Dana arrived with her attorney, Patricia Wells, a woman with a reputation that echoed through South Dakota's legal circles. She was known for being aggressive, relentless, and unapologetically calculated. Dana must have been planning this longer than I thought, because Wells didn't come cheap. They both looked polished, confident. Dana avoided eye contact as she walked past. I kept my face blank. The judge, Harmon, was a seasoned man with white hair and a low, gravelly voice. He opened the session by reviewing our filings. As he skimmed the documentation, he occasionally glanced up at each of us, eyes sharp, taking in more than we realized. Finally, he addressed the room. Mr. Wells, he said, your client is reported to have withdrawn the entirety of the joint account funds while her husband, Mr. Doyle, was hospitalized following a severe cardiac event. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, but I'd like to clarify. My client had full legal access to the joint account. Additionally, Mr. Doyle had recently refinanced the marital home under his own name without Mrs. Doyle's knowledge, which we believe constitutes the initial financial deception in this marriage. The judge raised an eyebrow. We're not here to discuss the home today, counsel. We're here to determine whether the timing and method of the withdrawal raised legal or ethical concerns. Wells hesitated. Dana leaned over and whispered something quickly. Clearing her throat, Wells continued. Mrs. Doyle was under extreme emotional distress. She believed her marriage was disintegrating. She acted in what she perceived as self-preservation. The judge leaned back, removed his glasses, and looked directly at Dana. While your husband was unconscious, recovering from a life-threatening medical emergency, you decided that was the appropriate time to secure your financial safety? That is your explanation? Dana shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Judge Harmon glanced back down at the papers. I'm ordering the funds frozen immediately. Neither party will access the money until the divorce proceedings determine rightful ownership. It wasn't a complete victory. The funds weren't returned yet, but it was a crucial stopgap. Dana couldn't spend another dime of what she'd taken. Outside the courtroom, Dana tried to approach me. Wells put a hand on her arm, but not before Dana spoke. There's so much you don't understand, Cameron. I walked past her without looking back. Blake was calm, but focused. That was just the opening move, he said. Now we began discovery. Discovery? He nodded. It's the part where we get to look at everything, and her financial records, her communication logs, even any property transfers. If she's hiding anything, we'll find it. A week later, I got a call from Blake's office, and when I arrived, he had a folder ready for me, thicker than I expected. We've got something, he said, sliding it across the desk. Inside was a printout from a bank I didn't recognize. The account belonged to Dana. The balance, $127,340.56. I blinked. This was hidden, Blake said. Your niece Megan found it through her research. The account was opened 18 months ago. The deposits are regular, just under the $10,000, 0 cents reporting limit, classic signs of someone trying to avoid scrutiny. I sat in stunned silence. Lake continued, "The timing of the deposits lines up with your long-haul travel dates. Whenever you were out of town, money went in. You've been planning this for a year and a half," I said, almost to myself. Lake shook his head slowly. "No, I don't think she was planning to leave you. I think she was preparing in case she got caught, or in case you left first." I didn't understand. Why would I leave her? I was breaking my back trying to give her a life of comfort. Blake looked at me for a long moment, then slid another document across the table, a credit card statement. At the top was a charge from a hotel in Minneapolis. The date was from 3 months ago. I had been in Seattle that week. The reservation name, Harold Jensen. I didn't need to be spelled out. My neighbor, the same man who'd texted me with concern, pretending to look out for me. The same man Dana had been letting into her house while I lay unconscious in a hospital bed. It was betrayal in its purest form, coordinated, deliberate, and ugly. I stood up, heart pounding. What's our next move? Lake smiled faintly for the first time in days. That's up to you, but if it were me, I'd make sure neither of them ever forgot they picked the wrong man to cross. Over the next month, the pressure began to mount not on me, but on Dana and Harold. They must have realized the walls were closing in. Megan continued her quiet research from within the credit union, and every few days, she uncovered another thread in the tangled web Dana had been spinning. One evening, Megan called with news. The secret account she had discovered now showed a series of withdrawals, small amounts at first, then larger sums, transferred to other lesser-known banks. It was clear Dana and Harold were moving money, likely trying to hide or liquidate assets before the court could intervene. "She's getting ready to disappear," Megan said bluntly. "They both are." I immediately called Blake. He didn't hesitate. "We're filing for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning," he said. "That'll freeze all assets and block any property transfers without court approval." That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of worry, but because I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Momentum. For weeks, I had been on the defensive, trying to make sense of everything that had been taken from me. Now, I was finally pushing back. The next day, Blake filed the injunction just hours before we got confirmation from Megan that Harold had listed his house for sale. It was clear they were planning to run. The court hearing was set for the same afternoon. At 1:30 p.m., I arrived at the courthouse. Jeff dropped me off and wished me luck. As I walked toward the entrance, I saw Dana and Harold in the parking lot, mid-argument. Her face was tense, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. They didn't see me, and I didn't stop, but I did take out my phone and hit record. 30 seconds, that's all I captured. No sound, but their body language said more than words ever could. It was enough. Inside the courthouse, Blake was already waiting. I showed him the video. "Perfect timing," he said. "Judge Harmon is presiding again," and he's already in a no-nonsense mood today. We were led into the judge's chambers, a smaller room than the courtroom, but no less serious. Only the judge, the two attorneys, Dana and I were present. Harold wasn't allowed in. He wasn't a legal party in the divorce. As the video played on the judge's screen, silence filled the room. The footage showed Dana and Harold arguing beside his car. Clear, undeniable visual proof of a close relationship Dana had denied under oath. Judge Harmon leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Ms. Wells," he said slowly, "your client has repeatedly claimed under oath that there is no personal relationship between her and Mr. Harold Jensen. Would you care to explain this footage?" Wells tried to downplay it, insisting the nature of Dana's relationship with Harold was not relevant to the financial case at hand. But the judge was having none of it. When one party claims emotional distress as a justification for major financial actions, like draining joint bank accounts, while simultaneously engaging in a hidden relationship that involves shared access to a concealed bank account, that becomes very relevant. He turned his attention to Dana directly. "Mrs. Doyle, are you planning to leave the state with Mr. Jensen?" Dana stammered. Her face had gone pale. She said she wasn't sure that she hadn't made any plans yet, but her voice lacked conviction, and it was clear the judge wasn't buying it. Let me rephrase, he said sternly. The court has evidence of financial movement intended to obscure assets, property listed for sale, and behavior consistent with intent to flee jurisdiction. I am issuing an immediate freeze on all known accounts associated with both you and Mr. Jensen. Furthermore, neither of you may leave the county without court permission. He paused, then turned to me. Mr. Doyle, in light of your documented medical condition and the evidence of financial exploitation during your period of incapacitation, I am granting you temporary exclusive use of the marital home. Dana's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Wells began to protest, but the judge raised a hand to silence her. This court takes the exploitation of a medically vulnerable spouse very seriously. You're fortunate I'm not recommending criminal charges at this time. Blake gathered the paperwork, Barry containing his satisfaction. As we left the chamber, Dana looked at me for the first time in weeks. What I saw in her eyes wasn't anger or regret. It was fear of consequences. 3 months after I was discharged from the hospital, I moved back into our house. The air inside was different, quieter, hollow in a way, but mine again. The divorce, once expected to drag out for months, was finalized in just 6 weeks. Dana didn't contest anything after the court froze her assets. And Harold? He vanished. Nobody heard from him again. He didn't show up in court, didn't defend himself. He simply disappeared, leaving Dana to deal with everything on her own. The final court ruling awarded me the house, my truck, and 80% of our joint savings. Dana kept her car and the remaining 20%. The secret account was split 50/50. But not before Dana's share was used to pay my legal fees. We never spoke again, not directly. All communication went through lawyers. Last I heard, she moved to Minneapolis. Starting over, I suppose. 6 months later, I sold the house. Too many memories and none of them worth keeping. I bought a smaller place closer to Jeff and Megan, near family, near people who actually cared. I even used part of the money to help Megan with law school. She's going to be one hell of an attorney someday. After selling the house, I used part of the money to pay off lingering bills and tuck the rest into a modest investment fund. I didn't feel the need to rebuild a mansion or buy something flashy. I wanted simplicity, a clean slate. So I bought a small one-story home in a quiet neighborhood near Jeff and Megan. The backyard had enough space for a grill, a few chairs, and peace. That was enough for me. I traded 18 wheels for a desk. My cardiologist had made it clear. The stress of long-haul trucking wasn't just dangerous, it was potentially fatal. I wasn't in denial about that anymore. So instead of being behind the wheel, I took a job in dispatch. Same company, just a different role. Less glory, less movement, but far more stability. And for the first time in years, I slept in the same bed every night. There were adjustments. I missed the road, missed the rhythm of open highways and truck stop coffee, but I didn't miss being gone. I didn't miss the feeling of walking into my own house like a stranger. Weekends became something I looked forward to instead of something I recovered from. I fixed things around the house, helped Jeff with his construction projects, and slowly reconnected with people I'd lost touch with during the years on the road. I also started spending more time with Megan. She was in her final year of law school, and between her classes and her internship, we had long talks about justice, about morality, about what people are truly capable of when they think no one's watching. She helped me more than she'll ever know, not just legally, but emotionally. And when her tuition needed one last payment to get her across the finish line, I didn't hesitate. Helping her was the easiest decision I'd made in years. If there was anything good to come out of everything I'd been through, it was the chance to invest in someone who deserved it. I never reached out to Dana again. Didn't stalk her social media, didn't ask around. Whatever life she was living now, it wasn't mine anymore. And I was finally okay with that. Every once in a while, someone will ask me if I'm angry about what happened, about the betrayal, about losing 15 years of my life to someone who turned out to be a stranger. The truth? Not anymore. But there's a moment that comes when you've been broken, when the floor's been pulled out from under you, and everything you thought was solid turns out to be smoke. That moment is terrifying, but it's also clarifying. You get to decide who you'll be next. Dana thought she took everything from me. The day she emptied our account, she thought she was leaving me with nothing. What she really gave me was freedom. She freed me from pretending everything was okay. She freed me from a one-sided marriage where loyalty was expected but not returned. She forced me to fight for myself, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually, and that's a battle I didn't even know I needed to win. A few weeks ago, while organizing old boxes, I found our wedding album. For a second, I considered throwing it away, purging the past, but I didn't. I just put it back in the box. It's part of my story, not something to erase, just a chapter that ended. The heart attack nearly killed me, the betrayal nearly broke me, but both taught me something that I carry every day now. You can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond. You can choose who you become next. And some people leave your life for a good reason, others stay because they've earned it. And sometimes the life you rebuild turns out better than the one you lost.